All right. This week on Left of the Projector, we are going to be talking about the Barbie movie. Everyone has heard about the Barbie movie. Can't escape anything about it. With me, I have a bunch of guests, some new and some regulars on the podcast. So I have Mike and Sterling from the Turn Leftist podcast. I have Hungry Rye from episodes such as Lord of the Rings, among others. I have Kristen, and I also have Karina. Thank you all for coming on tonight.
How's it going?
Hell
lots
yeah.
of lots of people, so it's
I think everyone's
It'll
afraid
be-
to talk and step over each other.
yeah. I think I'll go with what Mike sometimes does on your show. It's just kind of like the little kind of or there's a little chat we can, if you can use your, feel free to do that. But before we kind of get into the discussion and kind of anyone who wants to introduce themselves, talk about their work, I wrote just a little kind of short little piece that I was going to kind of read or share, and then we can kind of get into it. So really coming into this recording, I've kind of been pretty torn. I knew before this movie was released, I wanted to have a discussion about it. It seemed like it was going to be a big deal. And so I kind of felt like there's a lot about this movie that is kind of embodies what's wrong with film, but at the same time, it could also lead to interesting discussions. So that's a good thing. But it really does embody everything kind of about capitalist excess and all of that, and consumerism and all that. And so they spent more on this movie for marketing, which is 150 million, than it cost to make the movie, which was 145 million. So that alone kind of tells you what they were aiming for.
Interesting.
So, for the average consumer, I think that the marketing and everything about it, worked. And so there's a lot about this movie that I think that a lot of people love, and maybe some people here will talk about what they loved about it, what they didn't like. But kind of just as like a very aside, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she plays with Barbies too, sometimes. And to be kind of candid, I felt like, I think she sometimes has issues related to, beauty standards, even at a young age. And I wouldn't be surprised if, Barbies play a role in that. And so I think talking about it from a communist, Marxist, however you might describe yourself, I think is a good thing. And so hopefully we can dive into some of the aspects that I think are loaded within this movie. And so I guess with that, I'd say anyone who wants to maybe share their impressions of the movie, just generally, or any other thoughts they have, just from anything I said or anything you're thinking about.
Out of curiosity, do you know if the licensing part was actually applied under the marketing or under the production? Because I'm guessing licensing alone was probably a significant chunk of that pie.
I think that's just simply the marketing campaign, which is insane.
Oh.
Well, because I think since like Mattel actually produced the movie and stuff like that, they probably didn't have to I'm assuming within the budget, since it was them pushing the movie forward. And I know the CEO was actually involved in reading the script, and because I remember there was an article that I read that whenever they were first filming the movie, and the CEO read the script and was this is not what Barbie stands for, blah blah blah, with some of the script, I guess, with how the CEO was portrayed. And so then Greta Gerwig was no, let's fly you out here and you can come see us. And then he saw it, and then he was oh yeah, actually this is what Barbie is about, or something. I don't know entirely that, but that's what I saw in an article. So I'm not sure if that's if they changed their whole perspective on it or whatever entirely. But
Does anyone else want to share? Kind of give their thoughts on it. Be I
guess about Mattel itself.
I guess went into it thinking it was a Barbie history movie or something. I don't know. I thought it was me. I went into it as blind as possible. I didn't know what to expect.
Same.
I was very surprised to see the direction it went through. It was an emotional roller coaster. I didn't expect it to hit so close to home with so much of what it was trying to get across, but also at the same time, it was competing with liberal feminist ideals. So it was very conflicting going through the whole thing. It was very as Ben Shapiro would be like, it's too woke, but it was like way too self-aware at times. But trying to be feminist and being like, oh, it's just empowerment or something. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I do think, well, because like one thing, like I like Greta Gerwig as like a director. Like I like Little Woman, and I liked Lady Bird is like one of my all-time favorite movies. So I was really excited to go into this, but I actually felt like I was kind of like disappointed in Barbie, because I kind of felt that like as Greta Gerwig is like a director and stuff like that, and like she wrote it with her husband and stuff like that, so I thought it was going to be more. But then I guess I felt like it was too like, it's like almost hit the mark, but it was very like surface level, I guess, and I expected it to go past like the surface level that was Barbie in general.
Yeah, that's kind of like the nature of pop feminism, right? Where it's just like, it looks pretty, it's nice and safe, but it's never gonna go into those deeper issues. Because at the same time, like the film's like trying to sell product to like an older audience is essentially what the utility of it was at the end of the day, which really sucks.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say going into it, I had to I had to be very self-aware, because I think that as socialists and leftists, we tend to, just critique the world in which we live, right? We often put on this like critiquing lenses. We try to be objective. So I try to have fun with it, I have to say, because I'm like, let me loosen up. But immediately, a few minutes into it, I felt that it was very, what can I say, neoliberal, feminist. I wouldn't call it feminist, especially because I myself identify more as a womanist, a term coined by Alice Walker, which is the I would say the feminism that was brought up by Black women and women of color that strives to, include the intersectionality of gender, class, and social issues. And I just thought that it was more of like a desperate attempt to save a company, Mattel, that has a long history of these very misogynist, promoting very conservative gender roles. I did think like it was entertaining. It's a little bit of a step forward, but it wasn't enough. I'm not sure that it was supposed to be that way. So that's why I'm to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, okay, well, it was funny. I found myself laughing at times, but would I call it a feminist movie? I'm not sure. Maybe second wave feminist, because I felt even uncomfortable in the way at times that the men were being portrayed and women as like manipulating men in order to gain whatever their objective was, like, let's brainwash the Barbies, etc. It almost went like from one extreme to the next. So I'm not sure that it really helped move the agenda forward of what feminism and gender equity strives to do, but rather like it actually could be more of a backlash and regression that I find that I don't want to just like keep it as like the duopoly. Like I don't want to talk about just like left and right, but on the left, I believe are failing to engage with young men and the community of like incel that feel like quote unquote, marginalized, and that they're the victims. And then they're getting attracted to all these conservatives like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson. So I just thought like, I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with this approach. I don't know. What do you all think?
Are you talking about? Oh, go ahead. Well, because like I'm assuming you're talking about like Ryan Gosling's characters, like Ken, like sort of falling victim to like the patriarchy just because like Barbie wasn't giving Ken any attention or anything like that. And I agree with that, because like I feel like even like the ending where she's like, I don't want to hurt Ken's feelings, blah blah blah, and like it felt very like, I don't know, like it didn't feel like fair to like Barbie as like a character or Barbie as a woman to sit here and her having to worry about like how Ken was taking in, what Ken was going to do afterwards and stuff like that. And like I think like they were trying to make it like, well, you shouldn't care about what Ken has to say. But like I feel like the overarching like ending of the movie, it was like the very end, I guess, was about like making it about Barbie, but I feel like the lead up to it was focused on Ken, I guess not only as like the villain to say, but it was also like focusing on Ken, like, oh, well, maybe if Barbie treated him right or like dated him or whatever, then this wouldn't have happened in the first place, and Barbie Land would have stayed this perfect women in utopia, you know? Yeah.
Which is falling right back into the patriarchy argument they're trying to argue against.
Yes.
So it's confused.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, like what is the end goal of the movie? Because like I don't know. I mean, I messaged you, Evan, after I'd seen it. Like you had told me you didn't want to like listen to anybody else's podcasts about it or read too much about it because you wanted to go into it like tonight talking about it kind of fresh. And I did the opposite. I wanted to consume everything. I wanted to see what everybody else's takes, especially like, you know, women. Like you sent me that one podcast that had, I think mostly women talking about it. And it was like a movies against capitalism podcast. That was what it's called, right? Movies against capitalism.
Yeah. Movies versus capitalism. Yeah.
So I really liked that, the takes that they had. And so I had left the movie thinking, just being really happy that they used so many of the terms because they were not subtle at all. Like this is more on the nose than like Animal Farm. Like they're not using any allegory. They're not just like talking about patriarchy through some kind of story and using metaphors. Like they're just saying patriarchy and all this shit. Like they're just saying it right in your face. And so it reminded me of that meme that I sent you, Evan, about like people critiquing movies because Karl Marx didn't step out and make the critique himself on the screen. And it's like that's all they would have had to done was get Karl himself to say these words because the Marxist terms and the ideological terms are there, which again is going to provoke the right. And I think that was intentional because it's like an adult movie rather than like a kid's movie, like I guess I may have expected, to the point where I also messaged you, Evan, said like this reminded me of like Scary Movie or like the old parody movies like The Naked Gun with Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah,
you forget that there's a plot. Like you forget that there's even a story going on because it's just gag after gag after gag.
Yeah.
But then after I listened to those podcasts and everything and heard like the women talking about it, they were like, yeah, but it's glad, like I'm glad that they're putting this message out there, and of course it's good that people are talking about these concepts, but in the end they are rehabilitating this anti-feminist company that portrays this horrible body image for women and then is going to sell a bunch more plastic dolls. It's like from the materialist side of it, that is objectively bad for the environment and for everyone. So it's like I'm stuck in this balance between, does the idealist conversation that we now have because of this movie overcome the material detriment that is going to be the result of it overall? I mean, I'm just stuck in the middle. I don't really have a take other than that. Like,
it's interesting because you have to take the film into consideration, I think, with our current like political education of the masses and like with the rise of like rampant white supremacy and like patriarchal values. So like I get why it had so much backlash because we live in such a right wing, like in the United States especially, like a right wing nation with all those values. So I can see like we're not the demographic that needs to hear any of that because this is all surface level stuff. But it almost needs to go just like a step further. Just like I don't know. It's like Bernie Bros, you know, like progressives being in like U.S. politics is like a good thing in the bigger picture, but it's still not great. It's not going to get us where we need to go. So I don't know. I feel like we can use this movie as like a tool, like a stepping stone to meet like mutual ground with people who maybe weren't on the same page as before, and we can give them like accurate direction of where they need to go. Take them to like the more communist side, but like not scare them into it, but just make them more aware of like their material conditions through Barbie, which is silly that we have to do that. And we can't just like throw the manifesto at them and be like, here you go, here's your dinner. But you know, there's so much like scare propaganda in the world that like we have to like ease people into it. So maybe that's how we turn like Barbie into a comrade, like the Republicans hyped her up to be.
Maybe in that way, maybe it was a kid's movie because it starts early on, like you're getting some young girls into this movie and then getting the terms into their heads early on and the concepts of like, this is how you're going to be oppressed. This is how bad it's going to be for you. Like before
you should
teach
even,
your
like, girls that.
Yeah, hopefully before they're in puberty. Like I also went to see this with my daughter who's going to be 10 at the end of this month. And the two things that I remember her saying, this is really funny because her mother and I, like for being as progressive as we are, very much present like a suburban, just a white couple. And in one of the early scenes, like she literally says, she's like, "Mom, those are your Birkenstocks. Like you have those exact sandals." And then like later on, when Ken is like playing guitar at women, she's like, "Why does he act like dad?" Because like, because I literally do this shit. Like, but other than us being like the stereotypes of like the Barbie and Ken in the movie, like it was just, she left that movie very happy. She was like, "I really liked it. Like I didn't expect it to be like that. I thought it was going to be Barbie going on like an adventure of some kind, but like no, I really liked it." And she felt good. She felt like she got like the positive. Like I mean, as much as she's going to get those concepts from those terms and everything, she was able to get it. And yeah,
Very
she came
cool.
with the right message from it, which is great, because I'm not going to talk to her about politics in that way. Like I don't want to drill those things into my kid's head until they come and ask me these things. And so it gets those conversations to happen, which is good.
Yeah, I think it, especially kind of piggybacking off what Rye was saying earlier, of understanding who this was made for. You know, like you were saying, it's not. This was not the product of a bunch of communists and socialists, or even really feminists. This was made as a Hollywood blockbuster movie. And going off what Mike said earlier, I don't think anything like this has actually ever been done before. I certainly can't think of anything where they've taken, what did you say, collectively? It's damn near $300 million, and put it on a movie that uses the word patriarchy more than once in it, that, you know, uses male fragility even once in it. Like, they're doing something that had never been done. And I'll say this, obviously I could critique it all day long. I truly enjoyed the hell out of the movie. I had a great time watching it. I was there with my fiance, and not only were we laughing, we were looking at each other when we were doing when they would make a joke at something that was male fragility or guys being, patriarchal, that are like little things we even do in our life. And she'd look at me like, mm-hmm. And you're like, well, one instance is a while back, she had told me randomly a movie came up. It was The Big Lebowski. She had mentioned, I've never seen The Big Lebowski. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you've never seen The Big Lebowski? So I'm kind of like give her the whole rundown. And as I'm giving her the rundown, her dad comes in. He's like, what's going on? And she's like, oh my God, Sterling is telling me the whole story of The Big Lebowski because I've never seen it. And he's like, you've never seen The Big Lebowski? And then he gets in. And so when they did the little thing about The Godfather, she just looked at me, and it really, really funny. But poking at little things that are even some surface level jokes in there too. I think they didn't only swing for the fences. Hell, they really didn't swing for the fences at all. But there were a few of them in there. And to me, I guess understanding what brand of feminism this was is important, because to really be true feminism, you have to understand neoliberalism, you have to understand fascism, you have to understand just imperialism. You have to understand why sexism and masculinity really exists today. What those tools are, which are largely tools of capitalism. There's a reason they're very effective, keeping the workforce inherently more and more male as you move up the hierarchy, keeps these certain objectives that have been there for generations and generations. It makes it harder for them to change those things, which keeps those in power. So I think understanding that this is not that feminism, this is not the real feminism, this is, liberal feminism. This is your average liberal who, if you explain to them, well, no, you're not actually a liberal, you're a neoliberal, they have no idea what that means. Even if they think they know what that means, they don't know what it means. So I guess understanding that for a movie that was a blockbuster with this kind of budget that reached the audience it reached, and understanding that it's liberal feminism and not real feminism, which is what we all need, but recognizing what it is for what it is, I was very impressed. I would have never thought in my lifetime I would have saw a movie that even did what this one did. So I congratulate it for that. But yeah, hopefully this opens a conversation, like Mike was saying, like, you know, having these kind of conversations with your daughters, and that in a generation from us now, you can see movies about true feminism that break down exactly how these complex issues affect, you know, women in real life. But, you know, for now, we're kind of still piggybacking off the Reagan generation, and this is about the best we're going to get.
And I think that is the sad part, right? Because of the society we live in, that we have to take these like baby steps.
Yeah,
and like, can you really like critique capitalism and patriarchy through like such a high budget movie with this like, owned by a massive corporation? And then like today, I was like with my partner, with my husband, we were at the mall getting this skateboard for our son, and what do I see everywhere? Barbie vans, Barbie this, Barbie this. And then I'm like passing by, and then there was this man that came out of a gym that is at the mall, and this lady saying like, you know, I overheard her say, "No, men are too feminine these days." And then I just smiled, and he saw me and he said, "Oh, y'all want feminism, but if a man cry, if we cry, then you're telling us, why are you whining?" And I said, I'm not sure that's the case, you know. Unfortunately, not with somebody that is emotionally mature. It's like, you know, that's you all want feminism. Well, this is what you get, you know. And unfortunately, the average person interprets it that way. Like, oh, look how the Kens are marginalized, you know, and invisible, and they have to work. And that's what feminism want, you know. And it's like portraying the feminist movement, the gender equity movement, as this monster that is just trying to, you know, it's striving for the erasure of men. And I
hell yeah,
farther from true, you know.
Well, because like that's one thing that I agree. Like the Barbie movie kind of like made it like they were like, oh, if the entire world was just ran by women, we live in a perfect society. Like that's kind of like the vibe I got the entire movie, which is very clearly obviously not true, where like we need more of a rebellion of the working class to actually be working together in harmony without gender being something splitting us up. But then the Barbie movie is like, well, too bad if we just had women. And like at the end of the movie, it's like, and then one day the Kens will have as much power as women do in the real world or something like that. And it's like, well, that's like, it's completely like pointless. Like it's gonna make it like, it's just like feels like such like a backtrack to me to like sit here and talk about like, oh, these feminist ideologies and stuff like that, whenever it wasn't even, I felt like it wasn't arguing for true like equality.
I think
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think one of the weirdest things about the movie is one of the early like feelings I had watching it is I was like, okay, they're doing a movie where they're doing a gender reversal. So they're kind of showing it from where the men are now taking the actual place of women in the world. And I thought that they were trying to tell the story from a gender reversal view. But then when they go like to the real world and then Ken is like taking over and then all of a sudden it goes back and that's bad. I'm like, are you guys kind of saying that women being in charge is bad? Because I thought this was supposed to be a gender reversal kind of argument. And now you're basically making it look like they're fascists. And is that the message you're trying to give me? Because I'm kind of worried.
Yes. No, and all I wanted to say is that the irony is that Barbie returns to like humankind, like our society, you know. So it's like, what is the message that you were trying to give?
Like you don't even believe your own message to go back to like this patriarchal society after you just talked about how great Barbie Land was for being all women.
Yes.
It's very. I thought the same thing you said, Sterling, where it seemed like that reversal, and then they kind of had some other. One of my biggest critiques of the movie, aside from like the actual messaging, is that it felt very like kind of confused. It would kind of portray one message, and then I feel like it would then have another one. And it, again, it's a movie about Barbie who goes to the real world. I mean, I realize what we're talking about, but it felt incomplete. I mean, I don't know if maybe in earlier drafts it was more, and Mattel basically said like this is too strong of a message. It's hard to say, but I just felt like it very much came across as just kind of mixed messages throughout.
Well, because like one thing too, like I can't remember the character's name, but America Ferrera's daughter, like in the movie, the little girl or whatever, like the vibes that she gave me were like absolutely horrendous. Like the way that she talks to Barbie and stuff whenever she shows up, and she's like, everyone hates you, blah blah blah. And like I don't know, like to me, and then she called like Barbie a fascist and stuff like that. To me, it felt like it was like they were making fun of like Gen Z being very political and stuff like that. And I felt like that was a very negative message to put across, because like the younger generation is so political now, and I think it's such a good thing because they are usually lefter leaning and stuff like that, because they say like 18 to 25-year-olds are most likely to vote Democrat and stuff like that. But then they put this little girl and kind of made her like the butt of the joke to like be like bullying Barbie and stuff like that. Like, we hate you, Barbie, you ruined everything and stuff like that. And I don't think like any true like socialists or communists that like watch this movie, like obviously they know like those surface level things, like Barbie obviously is not perfect for body image or anything like that, but they're not going to sit there and like verbally degrade a woman because of how they're presented in the media, you know what I mean? And I feel like them showing that like made it feel like they were like, oh, the younger generation is such a joke, am I right? Like, why are you sitting here, like all they talk about is like being woke and being right. So that's why it felt almost like centrist to me in those ways. And I'm surprised like I haven't seen any like Republicans actually like talk about that little girl and being like, this is exactly how the left is. Blah, blah, blah. They just want to cancel everything sort of thing, because like this little girl was like canceling Barbie in like a way. And then like even whenever like she gets in the car with her mom and she's like, oh, that nut job thinks she's Barbie, and there's like not nut job, and she's like, I don't know, she says something where she's like mentally handicapped or something, like she like backtracks on herself, because like it almost makes it feel like it's like, well, like children don't actually act like this, they're not actually woke, they actually say these like offensive things behind your back, but then they're gonna sit here and like not actually mean it in a way. And I felt like that gave me like really like icky vibes about like even being somewhat left leaning.
It's like the reactionaries like trope of what like a leftist George Soros payroll employee or whatever is like saying all of like the buzzwords, but not actually knowing what they mean by calling like Barbie
I got that vibe hard.
And then saying that Barbie specifically set the women's movement back 50 years.
Yeah.
Like, not only that girl, the whole movie was kind of those vibes. Like, if I'm being honest, even when they say patriarchy, the fact that they don't properly like define it for some people in the audience who could probably use that definition, like I definitely got that buzzword vibe. Also, speaking of icky, how about that scene on the beach where the guy just slaps her ass and then she just like hits him, and it's just like a girl boss moment. I'm like, yo, that was sexual harassment.
Why can we not get arrested?
Can we not just brush past that so quickly?
I don't even understand like why she would have gotten arrested if he grabbed her like behind in public. Like, you think that would have been like a sexual assault charge or something?
What the hell?
Like,
I know.
That is protection.
How do you explain that to your daughter? Like, oh yeah, in the real world, when you get older, sometimes men are gonna sexually harass you, which is true, sadly. But you know, it's.
But like, don't fight back,
Weird
girl. You're gonna get
situation.
in trouble for it, because like with Barbie and Ken getting arrested,
Oh
for her
my.
punching him in the face, like that wasn't even a cry, really.
I don't know what they were doing there. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
And then like with the cops, like they were like started like verbally assaulting Barbie too, which I mean obviously that's probably how cops would act, I'm not lying, but they were like verbally assaulting.
It's a good point.
Like,
Maybe that's
Barbie whenever they was like, it was just really like uncomfortable to like we already know that happens, but I feel like them doing that made it seem like it was like a joke instead of like truly talking about the issues, because then like they get arrested again after stealing the other clothes, and the cop is like he's like, she looks even better with more clothes on. It's like, yeah, because now there's more to imagine. And it's like, why would
disgusting.
you like
Disgusting.
like especially for young girls that are going to see that, like, and they're gonna see that and they're gonna think, wow, like this is what happens, like if I know like America Ferrera's like whole like speech at the end, like you have to be pretty but not too pretty, and I felt like that was very like so like surface level, and like I like kind of cringed like watching that scene because I was like, this is so like almost there, but it's not quite. And then like my sister, she's 17, so I guess about like the age of whatever her daughter is supposed to be, and she was like, no, I really like the movie, but she's pretty liberal, and she was like, I felt like this was a good message, and I was like tearing up when she was saying that speech, and I'm like, it's so like basic though, you know what I mean? Like I feel like this is anything that you can see, and like I feel like some of the messages are like I see it on Twitter every day, you know what I mean? Like it's not like anything that's like, this is like thought provoking, and I'm gonna go sit in my car for like 30 minutes thinking about what I just watched.
Isn't that the shitty thing though? Like people who have never been exposed to like what exactly like emotional labor is, like have that told to you for the first time watching a Barbie movie. Like their invisible labor is real, and they're sitting there with their family. Like I remember during that scene, all of these like there's a group of conservative like middle-aged women and their daughter, and they just up and left.
Oh god! Oh,
up
nice!
And walked down
Nice!
My partner was like, you probably needed to hear that. Like, you should probably sit down. Keep walking,
get back in your seat.
Those are the type of moments you remember forever. I had a similar experience when I went and watched Bombshell, and there was a conservative couple next to us that did not know. They just thought it was a movie about Fox News. They had no idea what it was really about. Oh, it was so funny. They're sitting next to us every scene. They got through about maybe 35, 40 minutes. They're like, oh my God, what? Are you kidding me? And they're just like talking out loud, and I'm trying so hard not to die laughing. They finally got up and left. Like when it got to the scene, you know, where he's like telling her to pull her dress up. He's like, he would never. And I'm like, really? He would never? Because, oh my God. Anyway, love those kind of moments where conservatives feel fragility.
Research the movies they're going to see.
I wanted to comment on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead, and then I will. Go ahead.
No, because I'm going to take us way back. So please.
I just wanted to offer another perspective that I was thinking about. I mean, before we started recording and we were introducing each other, I shared that, you know, I'm a psychotherapist and I'm a social worker. My specialty is parentification and in women and complex trauma. And parentification is basically when you take on the role of a parent within your family or a caretaker ahead of your time, whether because you're growing up with a dysfunctional family, there may be alcoholism, emotionally unavailable parents, etc. And so you fall into this role of caretaker. However, by default, like patriarchal values, they ingrain this in young girls. And what I thought about in the movie is that they addressed that like from the beginning, a few minutes into the movie, and that is true. However, there is like a fine line between that and then the fact that motherhood is being perceived within the movie as like being stuck and like I'm a mother. And I just like that. So like, for instance, like, oh, if you become a mother, that's it, you're doomed and there's no development. It's like that is part of feminism and part of our autonomy and what we strive for, that if you choose to not have children, that's wonderful. But if you do, that's wonderful too. And that can coexist. And for you to be a feminist and embrace, you know, equity, you know, you can embrace, I don't know, so-called feminine traits. You could also be a caretaker, but not to your own detriment, right? And I just thought that the perception of like motherhood was, you know, like a static position. Like there's no room for development or advancement.
Yeah, I think that actually ties in well to what I wanted to say, because it does seem like even this movie frames it as like it's a battle between men and women for who's going to have like the power dynamic, I guess. And it's like annoying that it ends up that way, because I feel like they really tried with the I am Ken-uff thing and like the whole Ken arc, that like they show that patriarchy is even bad for men, but I still feel like conservatives are going to be so resistant to that message. Like when you see that guy in the mall who says like, oh, where are all the feminists when X or Y thing happens? It's like, bro, that's still patriarchy. Like if you're complaining that like the feminists are nowhere to be found in the foxholes or like the dirty jobs that Mike Rowe is doing, it's like, that is still fucking patriarchy, and your inability to realize that doesn't make it any less the case. Like, the fact that you feel like you need to volunteer for all these shitty jobs and put this all on yourself is just as bad as the fact that like all these women are being taken advantage of for their unpaid and uncredited labor for raising children or doing whatever they're doing in a household. It's like, it's almost like you guys are all battling against the real unpaid labor of capitalism that you're struggling against, and you're just like putting it on each other because they're doing the divide and conquer thing, and you're just not quite getting it. Like, I don't know. I hope that people getting that from this movie, but I don't know if I just don't know if like I feel like a lot of men are watching
a separationist type
like,
thing. Like, oh, you have to tackle this one, and then you can tackle another problem, rather than realizing like they're all connected, like capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and they all work to uphold one another. So by like forming that dynamic or like dichotomy between like battle of the sexes or whatever, like it's taking away from how we do achieve like liberation. So is that where we're going with this?
I just love going into YouTube comments of like videos of like these men doing like these hard jobs and everything, and inevitably there's always some dudes in there going, where's the feminists, where's all those feminists? And it's like, I'll just say like, bro, that's still patriarchy, and they get very mad and they just blow me up for weeks on end. Like
that tweet that like always like is circling around Twitter. There's like this like really dirty man that's like moving like this big machine around and stuff like that. I don't know. It's like a meme that's like on Twitter all the time. It's like, why aren't the women doing this? And it's just like some like dude like moving some big machinery around like that's like spewing mud and stuff, and it's like just
who's gonna carry the boats?
Yeah, like it's just like it's so crazy to me that like they sit here and look at this stuff, like even like Ben Shapiro and like perpetuates this and stuff like that, where they have such like tunnel vision on like so many things where they can't like ever see like the broader picture of anything.
Also, like, just conservatives doing the 2-button meme between deciding whether to glorify manual labor or decide that it's going to be automated next week and say they should get a better job. Like, pick a lane. Like,
one of the things that originally I endured two things. So I endured the 43-minute video that Ben Shapiro made about this movie.
Oh God.
Because I guess I'm
You're stronger than I am.
Originally, my plan was to play some of the clips or talk about some of the things he said. And my partner and I were talking about this, and I kind of decided that I don't want to. Everyone can go watch what he said, and I don't want to maybe additionally platform his opinions. But rather than maybe, bringing up specifically Ben Shapiro, I think it's interesting, which I think a few of you have mentioned, sort of how the conservatives see this movie, many of whom said they hated the movie before it even came out. They're already talking about how this movie is so bad. But I think it does make sense. Maybe you just said it, Mike, is that this movie would be beneficial to them if they could get past their preconceived notions and, their all of these things to see a different perspective. But then at the same time, is this the actual kind of content that really would get through to them? I think the answer is no, because immediately it's like woke Hollywood is, shoving this movie down, at them. So I don't know what my question is here. I guess it's, how do you reach people in that perspective? This might be off of the topic specifically of Barbie, but how could you make a movie where that actually could help them understand these things? Maybe that's too hard of I don't know.
I mean, can you guys envision some kind of society or situation in which it's actually gender equal and no one's being judged, like to the point where no one's even getting like the ick? Like today I saw a video on Instagram, and like this guy just went through a whole list of things that women had sent to him that were things that their boyfriends did that gave them the ick, and some of them were as innocuous as like waiting in line for something, or like
I saw a video like that the other day where it's like this dude was like jump roping, and it's like because he jump roped wrong, there was like an ick, and I was like, what? Like I kind of thought it was just like, but because like there's like one where like he got out of the car and like his like the crack was hanging out, so it was like an ick sort of thing. But it's like I feel like that's not like gender specific for a guy. Like I saw that for anybody. If it's like unwanted, nobody wants to see that in general. You know what I mean?
No, I mean
if you're not like prepared for it, maybe.
Try to envision though, a society that looks like gender equal and is, just equitable for everyone, that
Star
doesn't give
Trek.
people the ick now,
Star
because
Trek,
there's
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're not on one of the other planets, and you're
right.
going to either fucking join or be obliterated. I got some comments about Star Trek too, if I'm being serious. They pull up, lasers pointed at your whole
no.
planet. Assimilate
Honestly, it's not
or
a bad
die,
idea.
motherfucker. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's the
I
tanking
feel like
position.
that's a good idea. I don't know if I could argue against that.
I hear you. That I agree.
They sound like they got the right idea to me.
When you asked that question, it just made me think about how we started the conversation. The fact that we see a lot of like incels nowadays and young men that feel that by eliminating women's rights, like society will improve, and they will no longer be marginalized because they feel like they're victims. I think that perhaps if we take such a movie and then even at least tweak it so that it's not like from one stream to the next, that it's not like going from patriarchy to matriarchy, which wasn't actually even close to what we experience in real life as patriarchy, right? However, like that's not what we strive for, right? It's more like a community center. It's more like we embrace everyone's humanity. And when you hurt, I hurt. Therefore, like what we're striving for is more of like a communal sense of living. So I think that in that sense, those were the little tweaks that I would suggest to start with, so that people don't feel so threatened by this. Like, you see, now they're brainwashing our daughters and our young children to hate men and for women to become the oppressors, quote unquote.
It's like what you were saying, the way that they present it, the scene with Ken, and again, they're supposed to be doing like gender reversal. Ken goes into this giant high rise and he's like, give me a job. And then he's like, oh, they wouldn't give me a job because I didn't have a college degree.
Yeah.
And that is how they're presenting the oppression, as if that's what women are going through. Like that's why a woman can't move up, is because they don't have a fucking degree. Are you kidding me? Like they miss the mark a lot.
For sure.
And that actually reminds me of the scene we have talked about some of the scenes, but there's the sort of the kind of like the meta aspect of this is you have the CEO, Will Ferrell, as the CEO of Mattel, and they have the boardroom of all men, and kind of, they're going through, and he's saying like, oh, well, there was once a woman who was the CEO, which is actually true. I think one of the first CEOs, was Mattel was a CEO, but was a woman. And I think I feel like a lot of that commentary is very much like kind of like a liberal or neoliberal take on it, just saying like, well, if you just sort of
break the glass ceiling.
If you have a woman in there, and I felt that some of it was sort of like tokenizing people within the movie, and I don't know if you all felt that way with the Black president and kind of just individual characters that felt very much good that they were doing it, but is it actually doing something? Is that saying something?
Well, because like what I was even like thinking about is that like, so the first Black Barbie was Christy, which was like, there was another Black Barbie before that, but that was like basically just Barbie's like same facial mold and stuff like that. They just painted her like African American or made her Black. And then they actually, like a few years later, they created like a new Barbie called Christy that was actually like a Black Barbie. And they felt the need to reference like every other like miniature like reference Barbie, like Skipper or like Midge or like the pooping dog. But then they didn't even bring up Christy, which was like the first Black Barbie, which came out in like the 1960s, and they're still making new Christy dolls to this day. And they didn't even feel the need to like give her like at least like a speaking line or even like reference that character once, but they felt the need to reference all these other like other characters. And I felt like that's what made it feel very tokenized to me is that like, oh, we made like Issa Rae's Barbie the president, but then it's like you could have actually like referenced the Black Barbie that has like been made specifically for like Black women to like identify with, and they actually gave like this Barbie Black features and stuff like that. Like that was the first time that it was done on a Barbie doll, and then they just completely like ignored that, you know. And I feel like that just like shows that like it wasn't really like its heart wasn't really in it.
It's doing a lot of lip service.
Yeah.
Telling people what they want to hear.
Yeah. It like back to Evan's question earlier about how could you make this movie and do it the right way? It's exactly as Kristen's describing. You just do it the right way.
Yeah.
You just mention Barbie. You don't have Ken complaining he can't get a job because he doesn't have a college degree, and that's somehow women's fault. Like feminism and just female oppression, especially under capitalism, is not a hard concept. Like if you wanted to make a movie and really push the message, it's not a hard thing to portray.
And that's
The
like one
question is,
thing.
do they want to portray that?
No, absolutely not. Because
yeah. Like I feel like the thing is like yes, there's only so much that they can do in Hollywood because like Hollywood elites or whatever, like they're the rich people. They're going to like they're gonna perpetuate the media on how they want it to be presented as, where they're viewed like, oh, well, like society's going woke now, so we're gonna make a woke movie. You know what I mean? And so they're only gonna do as much as like what the masses want. And since obviously like even though I do think that like socialism and communism is having a big like revitalization almost, where like so many more people like after the McCarthy era like here in the United States are like more identifying with like communist and socialist ideas, that like Hollywood and stuff, they're only going to go so far anyways without them like I guess upsetting the people that fund their art or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of like controlled opposition in a way. You know, you have like obviously the ruling class that has their fingers into all of Hollywood, and they are the investors that invest into these movies. So it is very much their decision which movies make it all the way and get these budgets to be made. So the fact that they have control over something like this as a product means they also have control over what is quote unquote woke. So if they get to design what woke is, they can kind of set that goalpost. And maybe they don't want woke to be true feminism and communism and socialism. They want woke to be women are treated not as good as men. That's apparently woke, like in our world. Like according to everyone who's complaining about Barbie, because that's relatively all the movie's really about. That's fucking woke. That blows my mind.
I was also thinking about the fact that, you know, yes, representation matters, absolutely. But is it enough? Because even the Barbies that they portrayed in the movies, I don't think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen a Barbie with like the different body shapes that they portray in the movie.
I think they have now. Like, I don't think like. I think there are more recently that there are more Barbies with different body types and stuff like that, but I don't think it's like as big of a difference of like body type as like portrayed in the movie, because obviously we have like needle thin women and then women on the other side of the spectrum that are larger stature and stuff like that. And I think there are some like bigger Barbies, but I don't think they're like properly portrayed as how most women are actually in the United States. But then I also don't know if that's just because of like, if they do, then they have to make a whole new line of clothing and stuff like that, and then that feeds into like consumerism more, where you have to like, oh well, now I have this new Barbie and none of my old Barbie's clothes fit her, so now I have to buy like a whole new like set and stuff like that. And so then they're maybe viewing that as like, well, nobody's gonna buy a fat Barbie, so we shouldn't even try to make it because nobody's gonna have clothes to fit it, or we don't want to like put in money for something that won't be as commercially successful as like standard Barbie.
It's like the prioritization of profit over like representation
through like a message that actually could be pushed out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like Barbie Land it was like this capitalist utopia, right? It was so luxury, right? And consumerism, and everything is pinkish and everyone's happy and so superficial. And it's like, if you're going to promote representation, go all out. Then
Yeah,
No, I
Barbie
like
Land
genuinely
had
think
the.
this is like a prime example of like neoliberalism utilizing like identity politics
yes.
for not like a good reason. I think that's important to indicate. It's like
Yeah.
it's not identity politics is not bad, but when neoliberalism is doing it, it is bad because then they're just doing like lip service and trying to keep people like complacent, like showing like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just a little bad. Patriarchy's just a little bit bad, but that's
nothing we
lot
can't
worse.
overcome in a few years if we just all start becoming CEOs.
Go vote.
Yeah. Make sure you guys vote blue, because then this wouldn't be happening right now.
Do we want to talk about the electoralism? I know that's a big debate.
Yeah.
Electoralism in Barbie, and some people think that it reinforces that as a means of change. I don't know if it's worth spending on. If you want to take it on,
please, right? What's your perspective? Sorry.
Did you have something, Mike, that you were going to say? So I didn't want to.
Oh, just real quick, I was just going to say Barbie Land had the Star Trek like invisible labor, like just the magic production, because there were no workers or like laborers in
there
Barbie
was the
Land for all
women
that
at the
luxury.
beginning, the women at work.
They were
where
construction
Oh, right,
workers.
sorry, yeah, my bad.
And there was like the garbage women that were like pulling the garbage around, and then there was like a delivery woman too.
Okay,
like,
so yeah, it was a nonsense point.
There
to
was like
begin
a
with,
little
move on.
bit, but like
So they hadn't gone through like an industrial revolution or anything.
I mean, I didn't even see that many cars in Barbie Land either. Just like Barbie's pink cars.
It's a
the only
walkable
one
city. They had trains. You know?
I didn't see any fucking trains.
they had an airplane, right?
Yeah, they did have an airplane.
Well,
They actually have an airport.
To answer your question about the voting thing, so someone commented on a post I made about this episode, and I'm curious, as we talk about maybe the electoral aspect of it, the person said that the Barbies were subverting the election by tricking the Kens into not voting, arguing that the system only works right when people don't vote is a subversive argument against elections. So that's what this person commented. I didn't see it that way. I saw it. I don't know. Maybe other people do see it that way.
Well, because like I didn't even like think about that, because I guess there was like the whole voting thing with like the Kens at the end and stuff like that. But like, were the Kens just not voting beforehand, and that was their problem? Like, because like I don't understand. Like, they could have voted for the new constitution before their war, but then since they got sidetracked by their war, only the Barbies were able to vote. Like, I don't even understand how that would have worked. In
democracy. Democracy is gerrymandering. Don't you know this?
Like, I just assumed there was more Barbies than there were Kens in the first place.
Exactly.
And so, like, if they both went to the polls, wouldn't it have just stayed the same? Like, if Barbies all showed up and then all the Kens showed up?
Same thing. Like, they outnumbered them.
Like, I don't understand, like, why they were like, oh, like, are they just gonna block the Barbies from like getting in and going to vote? Like, I didn't understand like that whole thing. Like, and then even like the whole like. The whole thing was like the reason why the Barbies like all got like started falling into the patriarchy was because they were brainwashed or whatever, which I thought was like such like a weird like thing to like be the reason why that that was wrong with them, is that they were brainwashed
in like less than 24 hours.
Yeah,
they were like, yes, I'm gonna serve you.
Yeah, maybe that was the voting thing, is because they, you know, the Barbies were quote unquote brainwashed. So maybe the majority of even the Barbies, not even the Kens, were not with Barbie on this vote. Maybe they had to go do it against even the Barbies. I don't know.
Well, here's. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, like, it goes to show also that it's nowhere near as close as the oppression that we who identify as women have experienced, because even in Barbie Land, that was so matriarch, and it was like to that extreme, like they had that where the Kens could vote.
Yeah,
could vote. We only earned the vote when in the United States, you know what I mean? And so it goes to show you that even that portrayal wasn't nowhere near as like the marginalization and oppression that we have experienced as women.
Like I don't even understand, like the Kens were like the oppressed group in like Barbie Land, but it's like, what were they like? I don't even understand like what they were trying to like fight for in the first place? Like, what equality were they missing? It's not like their Barbies were doing anything like amazing or like doing actual like
a lot of girls'
things.
nights.
You know what I
It's
mean?
like the Kens were supposed to represent like the female gaze or like the male gaze. Like that's what like their sole purpose was, to like be in Barbie's gaze. That was their sole
And none of the
existence.
Barbies
And
even
somehow
liked
that
the
was
Kens.
oppression.
Yeah, they weren't getting assaulted.
Yeah, like nothing
God
was
forbid
happening
you work
to them.
beach. You stand there and
Right.
rise on beach.
I have to play volleyball all day. I had to cheer for the women playing volleyball. Oh no.
Yeah, where were the missing, murdered indigenous Kens? Like, there was not like an epidemic of like.
God,
I
hate
mean,
to
like, I
laugh
don't mean that
now.
to sound crass. Like, that sounds more offensive now that I said it than I imagined it coming out. But like, it's just like, yeah, there was not like the level of oppression that women actually go through. Like, it was just like,
Yeah.
oh, they're not looking at me, so I had a bad day. It's like, bro, that's your worst problem. Like,
Well,
Mhm.
it's
They're
interesting
like,
you
you're not
said that.
starving on the street.
It's interesting you said that because there was some uproar over the line comparing like the
Oh,
comparing it to the smallpox of
Native
the indigenous,
Americans. Yeah.
the indigenous people, and there are a lot of I saw some
They had no
people
like. They said they had like no defenses against the smallpox
Yes.
or something like that, and like compared that to like Barbie's not having defenses against the patriarchy or something, which like doesn't even make sense.
yeah, it felt like an odd joke. I just made me think of that. But the other thing that I was thinking about with the election or the voting is what the message that I took from it was that if all of the Barbies and all of the progressive or liberal groups come together and they all go to the voting booth and they vote, they can vote away the patriarchy or the fascism or the Kens or whatever it is that they want, and then like everything will be fine. And I think that that's kind of a message that we're told is kind of a thing now, and really it's there's
mean, we've
maybe
all voted
minor
for-
harm reduction.
We voted for Joe Biden, and now the world's great.
I
I don't know what
didn't.
you're talking about. I
to be
voted for
clear.
Biden.
Yeah,
I did not vote for Joe Biden. But I just think, like, everyone's like, vote for Joe Biden and the world will be better. Like, I'm a Twitter, guys. Thank you for that.
But that's just a message that that felt like a very like neoliberal elections are fair and good and all of that, and so it just. I mean, I think that a lot of people watching this, if you're a liberal watching it, you probably didn't think about that much because that's just kind of what you're used to seeing. It wasn't out of the norm, which I think is a lot of the things mixed attempts to kind of push people, but then also falling back to kind of just the status quo. I don't know.
Oh yeah, the liberals were rock hard when the Barbies were like taking control of the vote and not letting the opposition vote. It was their dream. We get to do a Russiagate. Let's fucking go. We've been waiting. It's our turn. Girl boss.
It's just really like I feel like it's very frustrating as like a woman and stuff like that, because like I went into this movie expecting like almost so much more of like true like representation and stuff like that, and I just felt like it just like it had like a running start and then it just fell flat on its face. Like right there, like about halfway through, I'm like, this is like almost like stupid. Like it's funny. Like I thought the movie was really funny. Like I was laughing out loud, but then I was just like, this is like a letdown.
It's not going to age well. I definitely don't think it's.
That was
be
literally
something...
what I was going to say.
It's going to age well, like in 10 years. Like I think, like culture, the way it moves right now with the internet is, and not even in 5 years, I don't think it'll still even hold the same message or have the same impact as it does right now, which isn't much for the more radical groups of people, but it's just not like a lot of those jokes and like the quips that I don't think it's going to translate well. It'll be interesting to see like people's reception as time goes on, and if they decide to make more movies like this, like I think they're theorizing there's gonna be a Bratz movie or
there
something.
already is Bratz
a Slinky movie,
and I watched
like
them.
a new one.
And they're good movies.
There was a whole list of IP
I saw like
that I think
Polly
studios
Pocket
were talking about.
movie and like Uno
Polly
and
Pocket.
Magic 8 Ball and stuff like that. I don't know. I saw some lady on TikTok like share this like fake like Marvel Studios like DC universe, like fake, like screen graphics, like the Pink Knight Rises is supposed to be, or like Ken Origins and stuff like that. And I'm like, I made a comment. I was like, this is so fake, and she's like, no, it's real. I'm like, it literally says the Pink Knight Rises. This is not going to be a real movie. Like what?
Checks out.
And I'm sure it's probably something. I don't know. There's supposed to be like a Uno movie, a Magic 8 Ball movie. Oh no.
Can we get a little bit of details about this giant Sour Patch person behind Ryan? I'm sorry, I have to ask. The whole time I've been making eye contact with this creature.
He's real. I don't know what's he has like grain like salt on him to make him look like the sour. I've never licked him though because I don't know if it's toxic, but I've been very tempted. Get that from.
I
He's
wouldn't
in here.
recommend
He's
it.
red. He's Comrade Red.
I would have absolutely have licked that man right now. And now my fiance in the other room who does not have context is wondering what the fuck I'm talking about.
Go ahead, lick that man, Ryan.
Do it for the vine.
For people who are listening, there is a giant red Sour Patch.
He's like 3 feet tall. He holds my Squishmallows and Coraline and Tom Nook.
Tom Nook, what a great
Isabel. The capitalist Tom Nook up there.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess as go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to try to bring us back to what we were talking about a second ago. If I could just be like the white guy and play devil's advocate for a second.
You can. You fit the role.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, if we wanted to try and imagine like the good ending to the Barbie movie that doesn't involve electoralism, just vote blue and everything's going to get better. It's like, can we really imagine like what does Barbie start like the Vanguard Party and like take over and like have a communist revolution and like create like the communist? Because I mean, also great, but then I feel like that does make us the meme. Like we are that meme of like the leftists who just want this. We're like doing commandism. Like we're just too far ahead of the people and we want this movie to be on our level when it realistically can't be. And I'm hoping that Rye, what you are saying is right, that Barbie walks so that everybody else can run, and that this will age badly because they'll be like, oh, this was very obviously corporate pandering just to rehabilitate Mattel. And now we have real feminist movies that are talking about like just putting up, you know, fucking fascists and like the Hunger Games guys, not Hunger Games. What's the Handmaid's Tale? Like the people who want that, putting those guys up against the wall. It's like that's like I guess the real good Barbie ending or something.
Yeah.
I think the Barbies should go into the G.I. Joe and have like a solidarity with them and get their guns and then go and take over and have like a revolution in the Barbie land. That would have been my
because the G.I. Joes realize they're also victims of patriarchy.
I would like to see that.
That's what they should be making.
They can de-radicalize the Kens because I don't think the Barbies can adequately de-radicalize them. It has to be the G.I. Joes because they are like center focused of
They've come back from war. They've seen all the imperialism. They see all the bad things and they can radicalize.
You guys have met dudes in the military, right?
Yeah, they're super left wing and like super cool people. I don't know what you're talking about.
I know.
I've met like one person, and they're like very like liberal, if even not even like left wing.
You know, I like the right wingers who basically are say, "Oh, with this Barbie movie, that's exactly what these leftists want," and I'm like, "My brother in Christ, I promise you, it's so far past that what we want. That ain't shit, dog."
That's what I was like the whole time I was watching the movie. I was like, damn, the Republicans are gonna look at this, like conservatives are gonna look at this and be like, this is like exactly what the left media is pushing. It's like, this is not anywhere close. Like I would have fucking kicked this across the football field if I could have.
I mean, this is what they say. They're like, you see, this is the agenda that Joe Biden is pushing because he's a socialist. And it's like, whoa, really?
My God, I wish.
I know, like, Biden is a socialist. I'm like,
get rid
what?
of money. Do it.
Yeah.
I wish he was the man you claim he is.
I would like that.
Right?
Yeah. That's interesting, though, the kind of how that would play. I mean, this goes back to, I think someone said that this is, you know, a movie made by a corporation trying to make money, pushing, a milquetoast kind of liberal, movie. And the one thing I will say about is unlike some of the recent sort of anti-capitalist movies like Triangle of Sadness and some of these other ones, in those movies it's very much like rich people are bad. It's better to be working class, or the working class can rise up in a very mild way. This is the first movie I feel like where it doesn't really focus on sort of like the wealth or any kind of class. There is no real class structure in this movie either. There's no real mention of it. It's very much just the system, which I think is maybe interesting, where they don't think they ever mention the word capitalism, but they talk about patriarchy, which is, linked into it. And so I don't know. I think it's a very small step in like a decent direction, but it's so far it's the best you're going to get with what we have, unless Means TV makes a movie, or that's go ahead.
Barbie 2, Origin of the Family. Can you imagine?
Oh, but yeah, I don't know. Anyone have any last?
I also thought it was weird how they disassociate like kins entirely, as if this civilization there's no romantic connection between the two. Kind of downplays the fact of how women have to, at least a lot of women have to learn to live with the very monsters that are out against them. Like, it's, as men, we have no natural predators in the world, and women literally live amongst them and have to, in a lot of situations, have romantic relationships with them. And so I thought it was kind of weird just to completely remove men, even from, like, Barbie can just, not if she wants to. Also, how the fuck are you going to pay rent as a single person these days?
But they don't even have that problem in Barbie Land, so I don't know why the kids are complaining. Like, I didn't see anybody paying rent. Like,
well, the kids were complaining they had no homes, right? Like, that was kind of like a weird joke.
They didn't even say anything about like them not having homes. I feel like Barbie was just like, I don't know where Ken lives, because they obviously had to be living somewhere before. They just took over and made the Mojo Dojo Casa house. Like
house.
Yeah. But then, like, I just thought it was really weird, too, how they, like, portrayed the CEO. He's like, I don't care about the bottom line. I care only about little girls in the least creepiest way, or whatever. Because, like, whenever they were, like, the Mojo Dojo Casa houses, like, were somehow being made, I guess, by Barbie Land. And then, like, all of the kids were buying them. And they were like, we don't actually care about that. We just care about, like, women being happy or something. And I was like, I feel like that's such, like, a lie. Like,
well, later on when they say they're going to make the sort of the Barbie that's sort of the image of an actual, a regular Barbie, he's like, oh, we're not going to do that. And then the guy has the iPad. He says, oh, actually, that makes lots of money. And he's like, all right, we'll do that.
Yeah. So
how do you miss the whole fucking point of your own movie?
Like, I don't even understand, because, like, he changed, like, his whole ideology, because, like, at first he was like, I don't care about Ken, like, I don't care if Ken's making us all this money right now. They're like, oh, they're gonna make a Ken movie, blah, 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 and it's gonna make us all this money. It's like, I don't care about that. But then it's like, oh, but I care about the money whenever, like, a woman comes up and talks to me about, like, this Barbie that could be made. Like, I don't, like, it felt like,
I think it almost was confusing. Like a poke at, like, the real history of, like, Barbie, because Ruth had taken Barbie in like 1959 to a toy fair, and it was a bunch of men. They're like, that's not going to go over well. Kids don't want to play. It was just all men at this toy fair deciding what would sell to little girls, and I thought that was interesting. Like, looking back on it now, like, I don't know if that's what it was supposed to be, but like, that's canonically what happened. And
canonically.
In
Ruth's canon.
I mean, I think that, again, back to our points to how they were trying to, like, just, like, hit all the check marks. I thought, like, oh, maybe that's why it's, like, satire humor, where they're, like, making fun of themselves, to hit the marks. Like, oh, yeah, because it's made by a corporation, so it makes profits. Okay, good. That's good. So that's why, I mean, I just tried to take it with a grain of salt. It made me laugh, but I think that, as we mentioned and we agreed, it perhaps is a little step forward into more comprehensive, holistic films that can address, the root causes of all of these, of basically patriarchy, capitalism, and inequalities that we face. But overall, I thought it was funny. But it was made by a big corporation. That just today I saw all these advertisements and all these Barbie stuff left and right. So,
well,
That's
that
their
reminds
goal.
me with like what you were saying, Rye, about like Ruth and stuff like that. Like whenever she first shows up, not the first time she shows up, I guess towards the end, whenever she shows up and she's like, "Oh, I invaded the IRS, blah blah blah," and I was this like great woman, blah blah blah, because like I was the owner of Barbie or whatever. And I was like, if everyone was just like me, it'd be a perfect world, sort of thing. You know what I'm like? That her like whole little speech at the end, like she gave me such weird vibes. Like that
It's
whole
like
like
I
scene.
get them wanting to like paint her and like because like what she did was like not great. Like they were running out of, or they weren't selling enough toys, so like they took a shipment of toys and like parked it at another place and marked it as like they just kept moving around toys and be like, oh yeah, we're moving product. Like
Yeah, like
literally
money laundering.
and very illegal. So that's why she got fired.
Yeah,
but then she got rehired.
I didn't even know she got rehired. I just knew
She
like
did,
that she
in
got
the
fired.
90s.
Oh, that's crazy. But then, like, I feel like that's the thing that is, like, they were, like, talking about this, like, oh, like, women can do terrible crimes and exploit the working class, too. Don't worry.
Hashtag gaslight gatekeep girl boss.
Girl boss, yeah.
That's right.
Something I think about a lot is just the separate nature of everything. And I kind of think about it as, like, green and red zones. And this will make sense in a second, but, like, I try to think about the divide between how far along the culture can be as far as like entertainment and everything, because you think about what they're talking about in this Barbie movie as opposed to like what's going on in our day-to-day lives now. It's like, how far could that divide get? Because I could absolutely picture a world in which you have Transformers movies talking about forming the Leninist Vanguard Party, but then like in your actual day-to-day life, there are like labor organizers being put into ice camps. You know what I mean? Like you could have that be that far apart. And that's actually what drives the culture war to be so just hot, because people see the difference between, like, the right wingers would see like, no, we're putting left wingers in camps, and we should be, because that's right, because they're so disruptive to our precious economy. But then they see the culture war and like movies that they even like talking about very openly left wing concepts, and it makes them fucking angry. Like they hate that shit. And you could even take it so far as to say like there could be the blue cities where they're very liberal and they actually are doing some punitive things to right wingers. Like if you are out and out racist, like, yeah, you are very canceled in those cities. You can't get a job, you can't get a house and everything. You don't feel welcome there. And it creates those red zones of like the Florida states where you're welcome there, and they are just openly fascist and they're just openly persecuting anyone who doesn't present like they think they should. It's like I could absolutely picture these things. So I know it's like on the one hand, I'm still stuck in that middle ground. I'm happy about the conversations happening on the ideal level, but I want them to affect the material reality a little more than they tend to right now.
But I mean, you saw how the movie ended. Like we beat patriarchy. Like yeah, we defeated patriarchy. Feminism won. We're good.
I mean, only in Barbie Land, though, because Barbie comes back to the real world, but it's still the same.
Wait, are you telling me that it's not like the peak feminist utopia to become a gynecologist? Come on now.
Oh my goodness.
That joke
it just brings you to the ending of the movie and being like, what? Like, was that the goal? Was there like, oh, we just need to work together and like
to get to this joke?
Vote it away, like
go to the gynecologist.
That was a very strange note.
Yeah, I thought
that
so
they left
too.
it on. It's like they didn't want to provide real answers. They're like, well, we'll just leave it with a little funny.
But I wonder if they like intentionally left it open because they like were like, oh, this is gonna make a lot of money, and we want to make sure that we can make another movie out of this or something. You know what I mean?
Oh,
but
they'll make another one.
I know, but I wonder if anybody that's like currently connected with it would even be in like the second one, like Greta Gerwig or Margot Robbie or Ryan Gosling. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like if they truly like believed in like the perspective of what they were pushing, they wouldn't do a second one unless it was like done more, I guess.
I'm pretty sure they feel like heroes right now. I mean, this is like peak liberal feminism, and the liberal feminists are like screaming at the highest mountains how good this film is.
What I think is also very frustrating is I think they made Ryan Gosling's Ken the funniest character in the whole movie.
He was absolutely great, yeah.
He was like the best actor, and like he stole like every
phenomenal.
scene he was in.
Absolutely.
And I think that's like, it's kind of sad because it's like, and then everyone's talking about like, oh, Ken's like Ryan Gosling's going to be nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for this role and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if he's like Best Supporting Actor, but he was funny.
Yeah, he was doing a fascism, and he was so lovable, and I don't like that.
Yeah. Like, I think it's wrong. Like, why is he my favorite character of the whole Barbie movie? It should have been Ken.
Yeah, it almost makes you like when he enters like our society, and then he's like, oh wow, I get respected just for being it. So it's like you hate it, but then you understand. So it almost like defeats the purpose, and that's why it's like, I
hated that I loved him so much. Like,
yes.
He was such a compelling character. Like, every scene he was in, like, I was laughing. Like, my favorite scene of the whole movie is, like, whenever, like, Barbie's like, I want to be your low commitment, like, whatever whole thing, like, girlfriend. And he's like, oh, let me think about it. And, like, goes back into his room and goes, sublime! Like, I was, like, crying laughing at that scene. Because, like, it kind of does remind me of, like, the way that, like, the whole, like fedora tipping, like, milady, like, sort of meme, you know? That, like, that's what I got from, like, that scene. And I was, like, I thought it was really funny because, like, it, like, got itself, but then, like, it doesn't get itself at the same time.
Is this what Republicans feel about Trump? Is this like how their relationship with Trump is?
So much that
they know he's kind of dumb as fuck and what he's doing doesn't, but they just love him and just for the love of the game.
Maybe I don't know. Because I just feel like the way Ryan, I don't know if this just because like Ryan Gosling is very like charismatic as like an actor and such like that. But I don't know, like I felt like bad that like he would be in like a scene with like Margot Robbie, and I love Margot Robbie, and I was just like, I'd rather see like Ken say his lines are way funnier than Margot Robbie's.
I mean, I also wonder because they were doing like a role reversal, whether, because when I think about the way that we're socialized, particularly men and women, men are trained to compete for power and women for the attention of men. And you know, in this society, it's like, oh, me, you know, oh, yes, men propose to me. And so it's almost like they were portraying Ken and Ken's as that. When you think about it. So it was just a thought, you know, like that's the way that they're portraying Ken's. But when you think about it, that's how we are perceived as women. And more emotional.
Yeah. Anyone else got any final thoughts?
Well, the only other thing that
I felt that was an awkward.
Well, there's like the one scene
I didn't mean it to be that one.
I don't know the actor's name, but it's like the guy that's like the intern or whatever and gets the call or whatever that was like, oh, Barbie and Ken were like out and about. He's like, oh my God, this is just like Skipper and Key West or whatever. And then he's like, I gotta go to the top, like, boardroom. They're like, you can't go to the top. And he's like, well, yes, I can. And like, so then he just like makes his way and he like goes past like America for his like character and stuff like that. And just like, you know, like he just like ignores her and stuff like that. I don't know if that like maybe had some like other subtext of like a white man just being able to like walk over everybody and like immediately get to like the top of the corporation without even really like doing anything.
But then they emasculate him, which I thought was, you know,
yeah, because then he's like, because then he says like something where it's like, oh, I'm a man with no power. Does that make me a woman or something like that? And I was like,
that line was a little bit cringy.
I know. I was like, why would you say that?
I just thought it was weird how like the feds and like the corporation were like working hand in hand. I don't know if that was intentional.
I don't know
But
if those are like federal agents. I thought they were just like, I guess they called them, but I thought like the people that arrested Barbie were like Mattel security.
Yeah, but just like the way they just call up Mattel, like the
Yeah.
feds just being on the like pick up the Superman
And they
phone
just
or whatever.
call like the random intern instead of like actually calling like, I don't know, somebody higher up that would have actually done something about the situation.
Stop trying to make sense of.
I want the Barbie movie to actually mean something.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I think the movie has, you know, maybe not the thing we want it to say, you know, within our political perspective, but I think I guess the question, maybe the last thing, and then we can wrap it up, is how do you then push maybe the liberals who are watching this movie? Because I kind of asked like how you kind of reach conservatives. Like liberals feel like they've seen this and they've kind of understand things better. They're cheering it on to push them further. And I think maybe, as Mike says, you need another movie that really does kind of push the envelope more. But I don't know how you then is it enough for them to start to have these, even if it's surface level conversations, to slowly maybe start to unpack things more? Obviously they need a push. I don't think that Barbie movie is the push, but it could be, you know, a tiny step.
I feel like one thing that like I would recommend if they were like a liberal that like watched this movie and like really like identify with the message is that they should read Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis. Because I do think that book, like I just started reading it. I got like halfway through it last night, and like there's so much information that I feel like about like the feminist movement and like the women's movement from like all the way back in slavery and stuff like that, that like this like puts it in a Marxist perspective and stuff like that in a way that doesn't even like, at least like it doesn't like, obviously it like talks about how bad capitalism and stuff like that is, but it doesn't like make it in a way where like if you feel like you're on the fence about like capitalism and stuff like that, it's not something that's like shoving that idea that like, oh, like capitalism is this horrible thing that's going to ruin your life, which obviously it is, but I don't think
it's like she's making a case.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
This is these are the reasons why it's bad, and you should probably agree. Like all of these things are bad. She does a really good job.
And she very explicitly explains how it also affects like the white liberal people, especially in the 19th century. As much, I mean, maybe not as much, but in a way that is, I think a liberal reading it would hopefully gain something from it. That's a good.
I think it's a good perspective that, especially if you are like a white person or a man or something like that, is that reading that would put so much more into perspective if you are somebody that doesn't necessarily have that like perspective of like a woman or a minority or something like that.
Well, if we're throwing out book recommendations, like if you identified with like the Mara Ferreira, is that how you say it? America
Ferreira?
Yeah.
It's America.
Yeah.
Like
America.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Rose Hackman wrote this book, Emotional Labor, The Invisible Work, Shaping Our Lives and How to Claim Our Power. I think this is really good. I think like white liberal men and like just women in general should read this. But I think like, I don't think a staunchly conservative man would want to read this, but like a liberal man who thinks that he's a feminist should probably pick this up. You could probably benefit from it because it does talk about a lot of stuff that like she talks about with like managing your own emotions for like men and like all of that jazz. Without getting too in depth in it. It's important stuff. I don't know where else I was going with that.
A book recommendation.
Thanks for sharing.
Well, that's why I feel like with like Barbie, like I feel like there's maybe nothing else that like you could watch just because like again like everyone else was saying like it's still such like a new movie like with these like new ideologies that are like being pushed and stuff to like the mainstream media, and I feel like the only way that like you'll maybe truly be able to get a full perspective on it is reading like Marxist literature.
Yeah, you pretty much have to send somebody to like BreadTube from the Barbie movie if they're like starting to go in that direction. You feel like they're reachable.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Like you gotta you just gotta start consuming like communist and socialist works. Like I don't like if that's if that's how
can't,
you
like, coddle them or anything. Like, I feel like at a certain point you have to just
like, if you like
be
the
very
movie,
direct.
yeah, like I feel like there's only so much that like I don't know. I feel like, and that's the thing, is like so many people don't want to read anymore and stuff like that. Like I feel like, not that like reading's a bad thing and stuff like that, but I just feel like it is so much harder to like sit down and read like a book and stuff, especially a nonfiction book. I feel like it is something that like watching a movie like Barbie for 2 hours is significantly more entertaining than reading this book for possibly 10 hours it could take you to read a book. You know what I mean? And so like the way that a time commit, I feel like there's no real good like something that you're going to get your most bang for your buck for like sitting down for 2 hours watching this somewhat progressive movie versus reading a truly progressive like written work.
That's true.
Yeah, I think it comes down to either you like reading or you like watching videos, and if you like reading, then those book recommendations are great. You're going from a liberal movie to a stepping stone to a progressive book. Or if you don't like reading, like Mike said, you go from this liberal movie to progressive bread tube, which is very much not socialist and communist, but progressive, trying to claim some of those bragging rights. It's a great stepping stone, I think.
For
I
sure.
think both of those directions are good. Just depends on your preference.
And thankfully, I think one thing that's good about like at least Marxist literature and stuff like that is so many people are talking about it on like YouTube and stuff like that. Like if you like look up any of these books, you can find somebody like at least dissecting somewhat most popular Marxist works and explaining it for the more common tongue and stuff like that. Because like I know like reading some of the stuff, it's like I wish that like somebody made it more concise, because Karl Marx sometimes just be talking out of his ass. I swear to God.
His name was Michael Parenti, and he did a great job at it.
Michael Parenti, I love watching his speeches. The other day I was talking to Mariah. I like got really high and I was just like eating chicken nuggets watching Michael Parenti speeches. I like
It's so fucking based.
I was just like eating chicken nuggets watching him.
Who are you, me? Jesus.
I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, you're right about that.
No, I am probably coming off as a Debbie Downer. But
Don't criticize Parenti now.
I just think that I mean, when I meet any conservative that I may find some common ground. I do recommend like All About Love by Bell Hooks and Salvation, like the trilogy, because it just states how love is at the cornerstone of any social and political reform. And like that's a little baby step into then more like socialist literature. But what I meant by being the Debbie Downer, I just don't think that Barbie is going to be it. I think that it's just liberals going to celebrate it and conservatives are just going to be like, that's it. And that's why, the world is doomed and women just want to have abortions and they don't care about marriage. And that's why, it's like, it's a work of the devil. Forget it. So I don't think that Barbie will be it. Hopefully it's a stepping stone, as we mentioned previously.
I hope that
I agree.
I hope that it could be for some people in ways that like Bernie Sanders was like, I think a stepping stone for a lot of young people. Like obviously like Bernie Sanders did not do anything like amazing or anything like that. But I do at least know, I don't know how old you guys are, but I know I'm pretty young. And so like a lot of people my age were like, whenever I was in high school, whenever Donald Trump got elected for president. And so like Bernie Sanders was running and stuff like that. And so a lot of people that's what I did. Me too. I was in high school whenever Trump was elected, so I couldn't even vote then. But I think like a lot around that time, at least like people that I was around and stuff like that, like the people that identified with Bernie Sanders are significantly more left wing now than they were obviously back then in high school. And I do think that's one thing that maybe like the Bernie Bros kind of did do, is that like he maybe like using the word like socialism, I think like with Barbie, like using the words like patriarchy and stuff like that, putting those words into like the regular like vernacular of like people and stuff like that does make it so that it is a little bit of an easier like stepping stone. Obviously, it's no.
But he also misuses them. Like he
Well,
talks
yes.
about democratic socialism,
No,
which
but
is not at all what he's about.
No.
He's a social democrat.
Yes.
They're very different things.
No, but I do think the idea of like when he says socialism, and I hear that, and I didn't know what it meant. It made me research the word socialism more, and I found like what it meant, and I was like, oh, I do actually identify with this. At least, so that's like I don't know like how like because I guess I'm assuming you guys were probably much older whenever Bernie Sanders was like big and campaigning, but I know as like a teenager and stuff like that, you see that, and it's pretty eye opening, I think, for someone so young.
Yeah, I get that.
For sure.
Yeah, so Evan, your question was I think I was trying to. How did you originally phrase it? It was like, where do we send liberals, or like if we want to get them?
Yeah,
to
I
act on
mean, I
leverage,
guess
like-
where we
The
kind of
labor
given some, like,
camps.
I mean,
Sterling. I mean, you read my mind. Like the amount of times you say what I'm thinking, buddy. Like, I'm once again.
Re-education camps.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I literally was about to say I'm once again
That have a lot
suggesting
of labor. You feel me?
re-education camps, because as much as I'm happy, like, and I'm fully confident that Barbie has opened the door for more of these kind of movies to be made and have these kind of conversations, and this literal rhetoric in the script, like it's not even just like a metaphor anymore. I'm glad to see it, but I also just worry about the reaction that it spawns, because again, as much as it is like a very communist and feminist movie or whatever, it still is pretty milquetoast. It's very mild, like I was saying before, and it still is going to spawn this crazy reaction. And it's almost like this contradiction in liberalism, where if you take everyone's ideas as valid, whether they are based on actual investigation and research and like, you know, hearing people's voices when they come from like a marginalized group and they've been oppressed their whole lives, or you take that as equal to the voices of like literal white nationalists who are just going off of feelings and like their emotions, having grown up in a white nationalist culture their whole lives, it's like, yeah, it's this weird contradiction. Whereas if you take those two and platform them equally, you end up with the fucking white nationalists winning all the time because they already have control over the material institutions. It's like, you need the fucking re-education camps, and it's not going to get any like significantly better until that kind of thing happens. So just putting it out there in the same way the Barbie movie is like putting the conversation out there. I don't expect it to happen, but like, I just want to start having the conversation. Let's get it into the lexicon. We'll start talking about the re-education camps the way Bernie was talking about universal health care, and it got it into the young people's minds. Like, we'll just talk. Like, nobody dies in them. Like, you don't die. They're not like the bad gulags. You just go there, you get you literally, it's like, think about it this way. All those conversations you're having with your uncles and like these people online that you're frustrated by because they just don't see the facts, like they just don't see reality the way that it actually is. The re-education camp fixes all of that. You don't have to have these arguments with PragerU dorks anymore. Like the re-education camp is the solution. Trust me.
Yup.
Yeah.
that's the message of Barbie for Barbie 2.
Yes.
Barbie
Does that
2.
be the title?
All of the
Barbie's
kids are
pro
going to
gulag?
re-education
Yeah.
camp.
If they were doing a fascism, why are you living among? It's like, oh, we're friends now.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like
Yes.
that's the like with the overarching like at the end where like Barbie's like, I'm worried about Ken's feelings, blah blah blah. It's like, why? He took your house. He kicked you to the curb.
Sterling, I was so glad you said it before I did, because I had that coming for like 5 minutes. I was waiting, and you read my mind, dude.
You already know we have the same brain. This happens literally all the time.
Barbie 2, the
gulags weren't so bad.
oh goodness. Well, I think that might be I think that's the end of our Barbie discussion. But it's been great. So Sterling, Mike from Turn Leftist Podcast, Rye, Kristen, and Karina, thank you all for sticking it out and talking about Barbie, and it's been fun.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks
Awesome.
for having me.
Absolutely. Well, everyone can listen to the podcast wherever podcasts can be found, such as Turn Leftist can be found everywhere, and we will catch you next time.